What the Heck Do I Know presents PM Update with Leah and Mia. And now your host, Leah. Hello and welcome to What the Heck Do I Know PM Update. I'm Leah. Tonight on Project Management Fusion, we're going to take a journey through time. Are we actually time traveling? Well, no. But we are going to take a deeper look into project time management and how Mason Miller attempts to take his career to the next level by learning how to visually represent a complex network of activities through scheduling. More on this when we return, so stay tuned. Hello everyone! I really enjoy making these videos for you, so if you get value out of them or just like watching them, please hit like, subscribe, and feel free to leave me some comments. Welcome back to Project Management Fusion. In our very special story tonight, Mia tags along with Mason Miller during a schedule management class and all of the things he learned. Thanks, Leah. Mason Miller has been working at a small construction firm for the last 6 months as an administrative assistant. A couple of weeks ago, he had to take some paperwork out to a project site and had a conversation with the project manager about what he could do to provide more value to the company and move up to a higher level position. The PM told him that good planners and schedulers are always in demand, and that a person who is able to represent a schedule visually was an asset to any company. Mason thought that sounded interesting, so he decided to check it out. Mason did some preliminary research on the subject at home and started putting together a plan. He decided that in order to be a good scheduler, he would first need to learn about the process of building a schedule, and later learn about the industry standard software package. So he signed up for a class at his local community college. Mason's teacher was Boris Baker, who first provided an overview of the subject and described how project time management was all of the processes needed to finish a project on time. He defined the process of building a schedule as anything that takes you from point A to point Z by defining step by step what you need to do, how you are going to do it, how much time it will take, and what do you need to do next until you get to Z. Boris explained that it could be as simple as a to-do list or as complicated as a 1,000-line Gantt chart, or anywhere in between. To start the training, Boris distributed sample copies of a project charter, scope baseline, and various other types of documentation they would need to understand and perform project time management. First, they reviewed the project charter to know the milestones and approval requirements that may affect the schedule management. Then they looked at the scope baseline. This document contains a majority of the information he will need, including the project scope statement and work breakdown structure. By the time they took a break for lunch, they had a schedule model, knew the level of accuracy they would need to have, had tied the activities to the WBS, and a plan for maintaining the schedule model. They also had established the Earned Value Management, or EVM rules, reporting formats, and process descriptions. While they were talking at lunch, Boris explains that in a real-world situation, there would be a lot more information provided and factors to consider. He should be prepared to get information from various sources such as meetings and expert judgment. He would also be expected to take into consideration things like resource availability, organizational culture, and risks when developing a schedule. Well, Mason and Boris have had a busy morning, so we're going to take a quick break too. Stay tuned for more details on our time journey. In the afternoon, they moved on to defining the activities. Using the same documents from the morning, they used a technique called decomposition to develop a list of activities. Decomposition is breaking down the scope into smaller parts to make sure it's more manageable. Once they created the list of things that needed to be done, they input the activity attributes, such as durations, material and human resources required, and cost information for each activity, which were provided in the sample documentation. Then they identified dependencies between activities, such as foundation needing to be complete before framing can begin. After that, they adjusted for leads and lags. Lead times are basically the amount of time between initiating an activity and completing it. In the construction world, it is most commonly used in reference to the amount of time between ordering a material and receiving it. It can also refer to approval times or scheduling quality checks as well. A lag is the amount of time that activity B has to wait to start after activity A has completed. An example of this is the amount of time you need to wait after pouring concrete before anything else goes on top of it. In the process of including all of this information, they have sequenced the activities based on logical relationships, dependencies, and requirements. Finally, Mason developed and incorporated a milestone list. He learned that unlike activities, milestones do not have a duration and are used to represent a single point in time. Normally, the completion of a major activity, group of activities, or moving from one phase to the next in a project. Some milestones are usually required by contract or charter, and some are optional. Either way, they should represent a logical start or completion of something, like the completion of a high-priority activity like foundation complete. At the end of the day, Mason asked if there were many more inputs to cover because he was finding it a bit overwhelming. Morris agreed that they were including a lot of input, but not all schedules needed to include resources and costs. This is known as a resource-loaded schedule and is only needed to identify where and when those things will be used. Tomorrow they would look at precedence diagramming, logical relationships, and create the full network diagram schedule. Mason had some questions the next day after thinking about the various logical relationship types they had discussed yesterday. So Boris spent some time going into more detail and putting them into everyday activity examples. The 4 types of dependencies are: number 1, finish to start. Activity A must finish before activity B can start. An everyday example would be that you need to finish cooking a meal before you serve dinner. Number 2, finish to finish. Activity B can't finish until activity A is finished. An everyday example of this would be that you can't finish editing a video until shooting the video is finished. Number 3, start to start. Activity B can't start until activity A has started. An everyday example of this would be that editing your term paper can't start until you have started writing it. And finally, number 4, start to finish. Activity B can't finish until activity A has started. An everyday example of this would be that a police dispatcher can't finish her shift until her relief dispatcher has started. Boris also explained that in addition to the types of dependencies they discussed, there are also different categories for them. Mandatory dependencies are required by contract or law. Discretionary dependencies are usually best practices, industry recommendations, or historical practice. External dependencies are anything that is outside of the project team's control, such as permit approvals. Internal dependencies are in the project team's control and include things like framing crew not being available until after a certain date. Now that Mason was clear on all of that, they put the schedule into a network diagram with a scheduling software package. Mason could now see how easy it was to understand now that they had a visual representation of all this data. Mason was pretty proud of his first schedule attempt. After that, they did a critical path method analysis, to determine the minimum project duration by identifying all of the earliest possible starts and finishes, and then the latest possible starts and finishes. Boris noted that the schedule had quite a bit of free float. Mason thought of boats and looked confused. Boris explained that free float in a schedule is the amount of time an activity can start late without delaying the early start of activities that come after it or causing a constraint issue. Total float is the amount of time an activity can be delayed from its early start without delaying the project finish date or causing a constraint issue. Mason crammed a lot of learning into the last 2 days, but he found it fascinating. Even after the class, he found himself thinking about the material he learned and starting asking more questions at work about their project schedules. After a couple of weeks of Mason being a bit of a pest, his boss called him into the office and informed him that the company was going to try out an employee training initiative, starting with him. Since he was motivated to sign up for the fundamentals class on his own, and clearly seemed interested, they would pay for his scheduling software training. As long as he stayed with the company for 1 year after it was complete, he would not have to pay it back. Mason was thrilled for the opportunity and signed up the very next day. With all of that enthusiasm, I think he's going to make a great scheduler. Wow, Mia! There really is a lot that goes into putting a schedule together, isn't there? Thank you for sharing that with us. Well, that's all for What the Heck Do I Know PM Update with Leah and Mia and our Project Management Fusion segment for this week. Thank you for watching and see you tomorrow night on our next episode of PM Update. Good night. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. I love seeing comments too, especially if you have a topic you would like me to cover.